From the moment he was born, George was a strange pig. No matter how much meat was cut from him, it would quickly grow back, and his weight would remain unchanged. The alchemist told George that he was the ultimate ingredient that could save the world from hunger. When George heard this, he was initially very happy, because his body could benefit others. However, George never imagined that after his father ate his pig's foot, he instantly spat the meat out, saying it was inedible and not fit for humans. The truth was, George's meat was terrible. Later on, George went out every night, forcing people to eat his meat. But after tasting it, everyone would vomit. Once the 100th person had vomited, George finally realized he had no value. Born as an ingredient, he was a food that not even flies would touch. However, just when George was at his most despairing, he met the Pope. In front of George, the Pope ate an entire pig's foot and gained the ability to regenerate infinitely. The Pope said his power wasn't meant for humans but was to deal with those who treated George like livestock. He gave George the belief to continue living. From that moment on, George despised all humans. After the meeting, George appeared on the battlefield as a 3S level synthetic beast. No matter how many times John and the priest tried to kill him, George would regenerate from one piece of meat. Worse still, each time he died, he grew stronger. At first, when they attacked, the priest easily cut off George's head. Now, it took 3 people working together just to barely chop off George's head. However, after regenerating, George's strength surpassed everyone present. With one punch, he sent John flying and broke through several buildings before finally stopping. Seeing that they couldn't defeat him, John asked, just before dying, why George hated humans. George then shared his entire life story. His tragic existence stunned the 2 priests, who couldn't find any comforting words. But John, surprisingly, understood George. Before meeting Jack, John had been in charge of the food supply for the Assassin's Guild. He had been struggling to find food every day. He told George that if he had met him earlier, he would have used his abilities well. However, George retorted that John had no idea how terrible he tasted. John, holding George's hand, promised to do everything in his power to make George taste delicious. Soon, George was taken to a restaurant to be prepared for cooking. Because of his deep despair, George's world had turned black and white. If John couldn't turn that strange-smelling meat into a delicacy, they would all die. When John tapped on the pork, it made a sound that only metal would produce. John claimed he had found a way to make the meat tender. He gently and slowly caressed the meat. The next moment, the meat became soft. The more someone tried to kill George, the more he evolved and grew stronger. Therefore, the only thing that needed to be done was to make the meat feel harmless. As John spoke gently, the meat even jumped into the flour on its own.
バカな！屈したのかあの肉は。なんて俺はちょろいんだ。
However, this didn't convince George, as his meat was extremely foul-smelling, making it hard to cook. In the past, a chef had ruined an entire restaurant while trying to remove the odor because there were too many impurities. No matter how skilled the chef or powerful the seasoning, the smell couldn't be removed. But when the 2 priests bit into the pork chop, an unprecedented delicious taste filled their mouths. They were completely conquered by the pork chop's flavor and praised it. George, watching this, couldn't believe it. He quickly asked John what he had done. John replied that during the initial preparation, he had used a mild light magic on the meat. This purified the impurities in the meat. This